Hi, I'm Peggy Farron. Thanks for joining us on the Understand Photography Show, where we talk about travel, nature, and fine art photography. Today, we're going to be talking with Erwin Buske, who is a nature and landscape photographer. We're going to talk a little bit about near-far landscape photography, a little bit about focus stacking, bracketing, a lot about conservation and what we can do as photographers to help conserve our beautiful earth. Remember, if you're struggling with anything we talk about in this show or others, we have a good foundational class called the 4 Weeks to Proficiency in Photography. It's an online class, but it's interactive. So you watch a video and then you have homework so that you learn the concepts, but then you have to actually do the concepts to help it seal into your brain and then turn it in so that I can help you and say, hey, this could be a little better if you did this, or if you're struggling, I'm there to answer your questions. So that's called the 4 Weeks to Proficiency in Photography. It's an online course. The next one starts January 7th, 2020. So keep that in mind. It'd be a great Christmas present. We could do nice gift certificates, or a Christmas present to yourself, maybe. Erwin Buske is a nature and landscape photographer based in Renton, Washington. Welcome, Erwin. Welcome, Erwin.
Welcome. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Where do you live?
I live in the Renton area of the greater Seattle area.
Okay.
Got my start in photography through basically the love of the outdoors, backpacking and hiking. Wanted to share these great places, and over the years I have developed a real love and passion for landscape and nature photography.
And now we're going to talk in this show about conservation photography and basically things that we as photographers can do to help with help me with the word.
Conservation.
So, like, in your mind, what is conservation photography?
Well, conservation photography is the practice of nature and landscape photography that promises a sustainable future. I mean, that's the simple answer. That you can practice it in many different ways. One way is like a documentary way, before and after damage to the environment. But another way is through providing people inspirational photos, because images have a way of affecting people at an emotional level. They develop a love for nature. They want to participate in those beautiful natural scenes, just like you captured in your image. And if we exercise our responsibility well, we can also cultivate in them a desire to protect and preserve those natural places.
Okay, that sounds like a worthy cause. Now, is there a reason that you got into this, just because you liked it, or?
Well, I've always been an advocate for protecting the natural environment, because I've seen it threatened, I've seen damage to it, and I want to protect and preserve those areas. Lately, with the advent of social media, a different twist has come to landscape and nature photography, in that although we're inspiring people with these images, some people will look at them and all they'll want to do is to go to these places, check them off their to-do list, and that encourages more of a consumption mode of these natural landscapes, where all they want to do is go there, and they're not necessarily concerned about protecting and preserving these places. I mean, we see that a lot on Instagram, Facebook. It's almost the objectification of nature, where that rather than developing a love for nature based upon actual experience of those natural scenes.
All right. So what do we do? What do we do about that?
Well, I think one of the main things that we need to do is we need to be very careful about how we share images. It used to be that we weren't really too concerned about that because if we shared images, there wouldn't be this big rush of people going out to visit these areas. But if we share an image in a way where, here it is, here's how you get there, we're basically just inviting scores of people to come into that place. And one or two of them may not cause very much damage, but you have hundreds or 1,000 or even more. If an image goes viral, it can cause damage to the natural environment. So it's one of the things we can do is rather than share so much about specific locations, de-emphasize that a bit and share more of our experience of the scene. Another thing that we can do is put that scene in context, because a lot of times we're going to the most beautiful parts of the wilderness area or the natural landscape. We're just showing that little slice of a much larger ecosystem. What we really need to do is in our images is share like a small portfolio of images that not only includes this place of iconic beauty, but shows some of the larger natural landscape that surrounds the area, so people develop more of an appreciation of that larger landscape.
Okay. All right. So now are you just solely landscape photography? Is that
landscape and nature photography? Yeah, about 99%. I mean, I say landscape photography fairly broadly because it does include macro images, some abstract images, small scene images, things that some people would not normally associate with landscape photography. But to me, it's all together. Yes.
So you're more like a nature photographer.
Yeah, nature would be a better description.
Although you're not a wildlife photographer.
I do some wildlife, but that's really not my forte. I'm not deliberately going out there to capture it. But if a goat or a bear walks into the scene, yeah, darn right, I'm going to go for the picture.
Of course.
And that's happened to me a few times. One time I was all set up and this deer just walked right into the scene, and I upped the ISOs to freeze the motion and started snapping away. Couldn't have been better staged.
That's awesome. I know. I'm exactly the same way. I like wildlife, but I don't usually go right out. That's not the main reason I'm going out usually. Mm-hmm. I like the landscapes and the macro too. So it's more of a, we need a new name. We need like a foliage photographer. I don't know.
Yeah. One of my specialties are the near far compositions where I'm getting real close to my subject matter with a wide angle lens, or maybe even an extreme wide angle lens. And I'm focusing, as close as that lens will focus to the subject, maybe 6 inches away, 8 inches away. So what's in the foreground of the scene is pretty prominent because it's, the wide angle lens tends to bring things forward. And it's almost like having like a macro scene or intimate scene within the larger scene, and then trying to balance that foreground with the midground and the background to create the balanced whole.
All right. So give me an example of something that you've taken a picture of like that, like a bug or a leaf or.
Usually like a lot of it will be with flowers in the foreground. When you get really close, they become very large. It kind of, it makes it more like, something that really draws the eye in. That's one of the first things you see, then create a visual path from those flowers that are looming large in the scene to the midground and out to the background where there may be a mountain, lake, the landscape scenery. Rather than just take the shot, really kind of lead the person in.
How do you lead them in?
You provide a visual path. And like the visual path, well, like the flowers might form like an S-curve to midground and the background, or there may be repetitive patterns of the flowers that lead the eye out into the scene. It's all about balance of the image, and sometimes it's not like a lesson in geometry. It's not always exact. Sometimes you're just suggesting this path with a natural landscape that's not always perfect, but you can kind of see visually the pattern. And sometimes that works better because it doesn't look so forced and contrived. It looks more like a natural visual flow.
Now you have something cool called mountains.
Yeah. All right.
So you said you put the mountain in the background. So you're not filling the entire frame with the flower.
No, that would be like 1/3 of the frame.
That's it?
Then that's, well, 1/3. Yeah. I mean, it could be more than that. You could do 2/3 too. I've had some images where with a wide angle lens where, following the rule of thirds, that 2/3 of the image is basically that foreground and the background is, fairly insignificant. Then the subject matter basically is the foreground. But with a near far composition, the foreground helps lead the eye in, but it's not really the subject. The subject is the landscape itself, maybe a mountain that rises above a lake or something like that. But it's much more interesting to look at that image of a mountain and a lake if you have some compelling foreground. The foreground's often going to make the shot, whether it's a good landscape image or not.
I've never heard that term, near far, and I'm just fascinated by this topic. So do you mind if we stay on this topic for a few more minutes?
Yeah.
Because when you were saying, originally, the flower, I was thinking you were filling the frame because you were saying make it big.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So when you said 1/3 of the picture, it shocked me. But now I'm starting to visualize how cool it would look because it would be a little distorted, right? The flower would be so big.
Yeah, it would be larger than what your eye would see it if you were at a distance. But if you lowered yourself to the ground, because that's a lot of times what we're doing, we're getting right down to the ground level. The tripod is flattened out. We're literally inches away from that flower. If you moved your eyes down there and looked at the world that way, it would be a fairly accurate representation of what you see. And, to me, it's a better way to convey the scene because, what do our eyes actually do? We're not looking at a static image. We're kind of looking down. We're looking out. With the still image, we're kind of combining those two with this near far composition. We're kind of simulating looking down and looking out at the world.
I think that's fascinating. I hope that you'll share. I don't know if you already did, but if you'll share some.
I shared some images, yeah,
you did?
already
Okay.
with you. Yeah,
that sounds really cool. Now, do you just lay down on the ground, all dirt and everything?
Well, yeah, lay down on the ground, and usually on the belly, yeah, or on the knees, because it's better that way to see the image the way the camera's seeing it. So like I have a Sony A7R III, which has an electronic viewfinder. I want to actually look at the image through the EVF and through the LCD. It's a little easier through the LCD because with the Sony, you can kind of flip it up and avoid, kind of getting down on the ground. But I like to get down on the ground and just really, immerse myself in that scene, check out all the different elements. Are there any distracting features to the left and the right? And often make micro adjustments because when you're that close to like a flower, moving an inch this way, inch that way can make a huge difference in the balance and the composition that you're capturing. Usually it involves also focus stacking because when you're that close, taking an image like, let's say at f/16, the rule of thumb with most landscape images, you go to f/16, go about 1/3 out into the scene, and everything will be reasonably sharp. It won't be precisely sharp, but to most of our eyes, it will be good. But when you have something that's that close, f/16 is not going to do it. The flowers themselves, or whatever that's in the foreground, will not be tack sharp.
Okay.
If you're going 1/3 into the scene. So usually what I end up doing is I may still shoot at f/16 or f/14, but I'm taking 3 images, one of the foreground, one of the midground, and one of the background.
All focusing on, let's say it's a flower, on the flower,
on the flower, on a prominent feature in the midground. I usually use the flex point feature in the camera. So I'm precisely focusing on those areas.
You're moving your focus point.
moving it out. Yeah.
Do you use a little tripod when you're doing that, or
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
so you've
With
got a
focus.
tripod that shortens that short?
Yeah, I have a great big tripod, but it completely flattens out. It's a
What kind?
Gitzo tripod.
Well, it's a Gitzo?
It's a Gitzo, yeah.
Okay. Oh, you'll have to share the model number with us.
I'll share the model number. And there's a huge tripod. It goes up like, as tall as I am, or even a little taller than that. But it also flattens out. One of the keys is to not have a center pole. The tripod, in order to get that low, you cannot have a center pole, or else the center pole kind of gets in the way of your ability to flatten out the tripod.
Yeah, and I
So
guess
I have
that's
no
why.
center pole on mine.
Okay, I guess that's what I was thinking. Maybe like they have the little small tripods, but also the newest thing that I have one and I like it. What the heck is it called? My brain is not working. The thing that goes on the ground. It's a little tripod.
Yeah,
Tripod head, basically. You put your head on and it's flat. I don't know why I
right.
can't think of the name of it.
Another way to do it that I see some people do is they take that center pole and mount it the other direction. That
Okay.
allows you to even get lower yet. I mean, you can get right down to the ground with that.
Now you used a little lingo, which we don't like to do in this show
Oh,
unless
I'm
you
sorry.
explain
Yeah.
what the lingo is.
Okay.
EVF.
Electronic viewfinder
So that's
on
where
the
you're
mirrorless.
looking through the eyeball. Your eyeball is
Right.
pressed up to the EVF.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what did you call this? The display screen? You called it the
Um, LCD.
LCD.
Yeah,
Which
it's
people probably
basically
could figure that one out, but still, I like to. That's the screen if you're using live view.
right. Right.
Yeah.
If you're
Okay.
using live view, that's the screen on the back of the camera that's about 2 inches wide or so. Yes.
Okay. I like that. I like that. So now, when you're let's stay on this near far stuff for a while because I think it's cool.
Oh, okay.
And it's a topic we never talked about before.
Uh-huh.
So when you're down that close, you're going to have a lot of stuff you don't want in the picture, probably, right? Like a leaf, or do you clean the scene up at all?
Uh,
Either in real life or in Photoshop?
both. I, I'm conservation oriented, so there's limits to what I will do in the natural environment. I'm not going to pick flowers that might be distracting, or move rocks that are lodged in the soil. If there's a little decayed leaf that's distracting, I might move that out of the way, or a little twig that's dead, I might move that out of the way. But generally, I don't want to disrupt too much what's naturally there. In Photoshop, I'll use some like clone stamping and also the brush that removes the spot healing brush to deal with some of that. Use a layer mask. I think that's actually more environmentally friendly than going in there and picking flowers and removing big sticks that are alive and things like that.
Yeah, I agree. Although I have to admit, we have a lot of invasive plants here in the Everglades.
Right.
I don't have any problem with picking those out.
No, I don't either. If there's like wild blackberries that aren't native or things like that, I have no qualms of clipping those back a bit.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I have a friend, Chris, who takes me out in the Everglades, and he volunteers, and they're out there, sweating in that hot sun to get rid of all that stuff. So I'm cool with that.
Yeah. Along the lines of conservation, there's a lot of discussion in the landscape photography community about what's the appropriate approach for taking images like of wildflowers and things like that. And if we go out into these wildflower fields, we're not careful, we can trample wildflowers that cause the destruction of the environment. It doesn't take much. A lot of these flowers are pretty delicate. You step on them once, and that might be it for the year anyway. They probably come back the next year, but too many people step on them, and they might not even come back the next year. We saw that in in California during the recent super bloom, where the California poppies were blooming like crazy in the Antelope Canyon of California. Images were shared. All of a sudden, it drove people into these areas, and we could see the before and after effects. Several photographers were posting images that were taken not that long apart, 1 or 2 weeks apart, where in one image, the field is all intact and beautiful flowers blooming everywhere. In the next image, there's all these social trails going all over the place. So we really got to be careful what we do. I always like to walk, if possible, on durable surfaces. And usually you can find a path in. You just have to kind of study the terrain, look for rocks or places where where nothing is growing, and get out into the fields that way. But don't just trample through the flowers, walking over them and lay down on a bunch of them. And that's just not a good sustainable practice for the wildflowers.
Yeah, that's so true. I'm wondering how do you, like, what if you, like, I just got back from Tuscany, right, a few weeks ago. And, we go in the fall because it's not as crowded and there's more color and contrast. It's pretty in the spring, but it's all green. So in the fall, you get browns and greens.
Yeah.
But in the spring, Stefano Caporali is our photographer in Tuscany. He said in the spring, some of the spots that we went to have, hundreds of photographers because everybody wants those iconic Tuscany scenes.
Yeah, right.
So do I. So what do you do? I mean, how do you say you can't do this? Or do you work with the landowner to say, hey, can you put a platform for these people? Or I don't know what they do in Tuscany. I have no idea. But I know we were in, I guess it was a vineyard, but it wasn't like a nice tight, it was like loosey-goosey olive trees all over the place.
Right. Yeah.
I guess that's not a vineyard. But anyway, yeah, I'm good at this. Anyway, we were just kind of all around those trees. So that had to be private property.
Yeah, right.
Maybe they like it because they cut that grass. Otherwise, they have to cut that. Maybe they like the people trampling out. I don't know. I'm just thinking it through as we're talking.
Yeah, I think it's important for all of us to become knowledgeable about, the rules and the regulations, the restrictions of private property. Just because it's private property doesn't necessarily mean they don't want you there. I mean, if there's tourism involved, and they might provide provision for us to take those scenes. I'm not familiar specifically with Tuscany and what the restrictions are there, but whenever I go to a place and there is private property, I try to find out what are those restrictions. Like earlier this year, I was out in the Skagit Valley which is north of Seattle, where it's a beautiful delta that has some great views looking out to Mount Baker, and there's snow geese that migrate into that area in the wintertime. And there's this one spot where I really wanted to take a picture. I've seen it posted by other people on social media, and I finally figured out where it is. I thought I could do it a little bit differently, do the Erwin Buske take on the scene. Then I realized it was on private property, the ability to really take that image. So I saw the owner of the property. I talked to her and asked her, would it be okay for me to walk onto your property and take this image? And she said, oh, yeah, please do. And even pointed me up to a deck on her house where I could access, the image from there with a better view. That I could look over some of these trees and things that were obstructing the view. So, I mean, that's one way to do it. It's just to ask them.
How do you know, though? What if she wasn't there? Would you not?
Yeah, if she wasn't there.
Or?
Well, I could have taken the image from the street. It just wouldn't have been as good. And I think that's what a lot of the photographers have done. Or they've gone out onto her property without asking her. And I think that is not good, because if enough people do that, eventually the owner will react and take steps to shut down the area to other people.
Yeah.
I've
heard that's happening out in the Palouse a lot. That people
Right. Yeah.
deliberately making bad photos because they're so tired of photographers who are disrespectful.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. They walk out onto those farm fields and yeah, most of the people in the police go to a place called Steptoe Butte, which is a state park. It's a little mountain that rises above the wheat fields that people so love to photograph in the spring and the early summer, and that's okay because it's state land. But I think some of them are actually going down lower and walking into the fields themselves, doing a near far composition of the wheat and the barns and things like that. And that's not necessarily a good thing. I think some of the workshop leaders have permission to do that, so I wouldn't judge prematurely. Some of them are doing it with the appropriate permissions. So.
Right. Yeah. And same thing with even if it's state or nationally owned land. I know we pay a lot of money for our Everglades National Park permit, and there are only two
Yeah.
photographers who have that permit, and one
Yeah.
of them doesn't live here. So why are there thousands of photo tours in the Everglades National Park
Yeah.
if there's
Yeah.
only two of us paying for a permit?
So you need to have a commercial use permit to
Yeah, you do.
to operate commercially. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the same thing here with Mount Rainier National Park, for example. I think there's more than just two there. I think there's about 12 photographers that have a commercial use permit to lead workshops out there. But if you do a quick search on the web, you'll find like 10 times that many photographers that are conducting workshops. So
Yeah.
yeah, I went to the source website for who actually has authority to do it, and it's not that many. So I don't know what these other people are doing. They're risking it. I've heard of some instances where the rangers are clamping down. And
and I don't know what the answer is though, because some of them, the prices are just so crazy that there's
right,
no way, do they
yeah,
not want the tourism? I mean, I live in Florida. We need tourism. That's our main.
right, yeah,
So if you're clamping down too much,
right,
people ignore it.
uh-huh,
Part of, Photoshop, they started renting it for $10 a month, but I don't know if you remember when they first started renting it, it was $50 a month. People were just stealing it.
Yeah, right.
It's too much money. And I think that's what's going on with those permits. They're so expensive.
That's a good point. I never thought of that. That if you make the bureaucracy and the regulatory actions a little bit more friendly, maybe that would encourage more people to legitimately come into the process, and that would actually help manage better the number of workshops going into these areas. Yeah, that's a good point. Yes,
that's exactly my point. I know, Fakahatchee just started a permitting thing, which is a small area, and the permit's almost as much as Everglades National Park, and it's just like, I guess we're not going there anymore because I'm not paying that for that little tiny area,
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm starting to become much more conscious of it because I lead one-on-one workshops primarily out into these areas, and I'm trying to direct people to places where I have the commercial use permits. I have commercial use permits for Washington State parks, which includes the Palouse, Cape Disappointment out on the ocean, includes a lot of nice areas, Deception Pass Park along the Puget Sound. But I don't have permits for some of the national parks. So it's a horrendous task to do that. For someone that's doing a one-on-one workshop, is it really worth my while, to pay these hefty fees and fill out all this paperwork? I wish they would make it more of a simple process, and that they could reel people like myself in and make sure that we're all doing it on the up and up.
So, all right. So let's talk about now so we're going to go back to conversation, but I like that you're throwing technical stuff in there because it's really helpful. Except the buzz. Actually, I like the buzzwords too. It's just you have to explain what they are.
Yeah, I understand.
So you're a photographer because you love photography, like I am, like most people are, right? But you're out there. Conservation is a big part of who you are as a human being and as a photographer.
Yes.
So you what you're saying to me is you want people to see the beauty of the area so that they will want to preserve it.
Yes.
In your stories. How do you, I mean, how do you convey that that's your message rather than this is just a pretty picture?
Well, I think one of the key things to do is to not just share the scene, like I mentioned earlier, that here it is, here's the name of the place. It's Bridal Falls, Oregon. Beautiful falls, picture, that's it. Rather than do that, provide a story where you share some of your experience visiting these falls. Walking through the trail, the things that you noticed along the way, your state of mind at the time, maybe some of what you felt at the scene, how it impacted you on an emotional level. Provide some of that experience of the scene rather than here it is. Maybe even in the image title, rather than call it Bridal Falls, call it something like Under the Golden Shower of Autumn or something like that. If you're visiting it in the autumn season, think about the title. Think about where you're sharing the image. Who are you sharing it to? Is the audience that you're sharing it to, are they in more of a consumption mode of, all I want to do is find out where this place is at and go visit it myself and take my own picture? Or are they really appreciating the work that you've put into the image?
So where are you sharing these images?
I share primarily to Facebook on my own profile and my page, which I can control pretty well. But I also share to different groups. There's like a Washington Beauty group. There's a group which I manage, which is called Destination Pacific Northwest, which is a collection of about 20 photographers where we collaborate together to present our images collectively on a Facebook page. We can kind of control things a little bit better that way. Raise the quality of the images, include images that tell these stories. And I think through that process, we're attracting a little bit different audience than if it's just like, here it is, kind of a thing.
So you tell a little bit of the story in the comments when you're putting up the pictures?
Yeah, in the narrative, right, exactly.
And now, do you sell your work?
Oh, yeah. A lot of the sales do come from social media. That's how they find out about me. Social media, then they link from social media to the website, which I have, where they can purchase prints directly. My business, my small business, is probably about 70% prints. Actually, I sell quite a few of them.
Now you blog as well, right?
I blog. Yeah, that helps too. I think, as it helps put the image in context. I think that's what's so missing on social media today. I mean, it's just, here it is kind of a thing, rather than putting the image in context. And if you blog, you can say so much more about it. I had a recent blog where I put out that was about inspiration, conservation, preservation, environmental movement. I think that's probably one of the ways that you found out about me. I've had other ones that talk about visiting different places. The Enchantment Lakes, I wrote one on that, and that's a beautiful area in the Alpine Lakes Wilderness area. That's close to the Seattle area, where the trees turn this golden color. They're like a conifer tree, but they actually turn gold and lose their needles during the autumn. And they have these beautiful indigo blue lakes underneath these massive granite mountains, Presic Peak and others. Very attractive place. I wrote a blog article, and hopefully that I share enough of my experience of the place that people that just don't want to go there to tick it off as something that's on their bucket list, but they truly want to experience this place in all of its majesty and beauty.
So how do you convey that even in words? Do you preach to them? While you're here, don't step on the flowers?
I do some of that, but I do it in great moderation. I find that, I mean, there's a few photographers out there that every single image they're kind of preaching, and you ought to sign up and call this person, write a letter to this congressperson, and that kind of thing. And I notice that their followings and the amount of impact that their posts have are very small. People don't want to hear that.
No, they don't want to be preached to.
They're right. But if you
they
sneak
need
it
to
in,
hear it. So
they
you
need to
sneak
hear
it
it.
in.
You
Okay.
sneak it in once in a while, not every single post, maybe 1 out of 10 posts. When I lead workshops, or I also lead groups of people through the Seattle Mountaineers, which is a recreational organization, takes people out into the Cascades of Washington State. They also have a photography committee. I lead groups there. I'm also very careful there to always include as part of our initial discussion going into these places, discussions of leave no trace principles, nature first principles, walk on durable surfaces, always leave the place better than you found it, be very mindful about how you share images and things like that. I include that as part of the discussion,
Okay.
but I don't dwell on it. I mean, it's maybe occupies 5-10 minutes of the time of a 1 day workshop.
Right. Okay. Now, do you work with any conservation groups at all? And if you do, how do you work with them?
I have. Last couple of years, I've worked with Washington Wild, which is a conservation advocacy group here in Washington State. They specifically address issues that are important to Washington, so they have more of a narrow focus. I've donated a couple of images to them where they've auctioned images on what they call their wild night out, where everybody comes together and drinks some beer and has some fun. And 100% of the proceeds of the images go back to the organization to support their cause. I've done it that way. I support the Nature Conservancy through fundraising activities, usually involving my images. Like I've had calendar sales where I've told people that I'm going to donate either 100% or 50% of the proceeds to the cause of Nature Conservancy. I really like the Nature Conservancy because they kind of work with the free enterprise system to buy land outright and protect areas. Like they bought this island, one of the San Juan Islands called Yellow Island, which is a wildflower preserve where plants grow there that grow nowhere else. They had the opportunity just to buy it outright. That kind of takes it out of the political arena. So with changes of administrations and the shifting political climates, that's going to stay preserved forever. So I prefer to work in that way if I can. Of course, not everything can be protected that way. Sometimes we do need to engage in the tough political battles. And in that regard, I've been almost a lifelong supporter of the Sierra Club. I've participated in many of their outings. I've co-led one of their outings where people come together, not just to enjoy the wilderness areas, but every night is part of those outings. There is a short period of time where they discuss conservation issues, some that are specific to the location we're visiting.
Okay.
Those are some of the ways I've helped out.
So as photographers, I'm just going to, I don't mean to downplay it, but it sounds to me the best or the main thing that we can do as photographers is donate either, nice prints for silent auctions or pictures for their website or promotional pictures. We can donate pictures is what we can do as photographers more than anything if we want to stay related to photography. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the main things, but I wouldn't underestimate also what we were talking about earlier is being good ambassadors, role models for protecting the environment, being good stewards of the environment, leaving it better than how we found it. That kind of relates to how I define conservation at the early part of this interview is we want to practice nature and landscape photography in a way that helps promise a sustainable future. So that should always kind of be on our mind. Yes, yeah, especially with what we've seen with destruction caused by too many people visiting a site due to basically social media tourism. You know, people come to these places finding out about it through the images we post on the social media. So we really got to be really careful.
Yeah, and I think, it's my belief, I guess, that people want to fit in and be cool. So if we all like say, hey, it's not cool to trample these flowers, I think it gets people to say, oh, you know what? I should be more aware of this.
Yes. Yeah. I think you're exactly right.
Slapping a law on it is not usually the answer.
Right.
Like the permits I just talked about, that's not the answer. It's not working,
Yeah.
So,
it's more has more to do with education and doing that in a manner that's friendly, people
and it's
that people will accept.
Though. It's not just education. It's what's the right word I'm looking for?
Modeling good behaviors.
And just it has to be cool. I don't know. I can't think of the way I'm trying to say, because I'm just going to give you a really horrible thing that happened here. We had right in the middle of the Everglades, we had one of those old stands, that we would call like a Wawa nowadays. It had a little gas station and a convenience store. It was a 2-story wooden building that shut down, and it was, falling apart. And so it was called Monroe Station, and it was like halfway through the Everglades where you could stop and get gas, whatever. And it's been closed down for 50 years, 100 years, I don't know, a long, long time. So an entire photography group from Miami went out there, and I don't know how many people were there completely, but they got up on the top of that and did the steel wool photography, where you burn the steel wool, and they burnt it to the ground.
Oh, man.
Now, if that was a group of 20 people, let's say, why didn't somebody say, hey, this is wrong?
Yeah, right.
I mean, it wasn't, they thought it was funny or something, I guess. I don't know. But it should have been like unacceptable.
Right. And I think we're starting to
up there, I'm reporting you to the police, or, you're an idiot or something.
Yeah. I think we're starting to see more of I think we're starting to see more of that. People are more willing to confront others, I think, on these issues on the trail. I think it's very important to do it in a way that's, that it doesn't come across as too confrontational. I agree. But we still need to do it.
But if you're people that are your friends, you can be a little more confrontational.
Right.
If you're in a camera club or something, and the camera club is doing this, you can say, hey.
Yeah.
If you're a stranger and you see that happening, I'm not sure. What do you do?
Yeah, it could cause a very negative reaction.
Yeah. You don't want somebody to beat you up out in the Everglades.
Yeah, beat you up, or it causes them to do just the opposite. Well, I'm not going to let anyone tell me what to do. I'm just going to do it even more.
Exactly.
So we do need to be careful, but I think it does have an impact. We do it in a benign way. Enough people do it. The consciousness of the entire landscape nature photography group rises to a different level. People are just generally more aware of it. They may have gone out into that flower field and before, but now they're kind of looking around. Well, if I do this, people are going to, they're going to call me out on this. I probably shouldn't.
And just like you said, the awareness, because that leave no trace, whoever came up with that little tagline, that was brilliant, because I think that's in people's minds now. Leave no trace.
It is,
leave no trace. I practice the philosophy of leave no trace. So people are putting that on their websites. They're putting it on their social media. And it's starting to be like, okay, this is something I should be aware of, I guess.
Right. It's a good mantra.
Yeah. It's hard to come up with those. I was quite proud of mine. We simplify the technical. That took me a long time.
Yeah.
But what else can we talk about? What else? Do you have any nice photography tips that you can tell us?
Most of my images I do bracket, in addition to the focus stacking that we talked about earlier. Usually I use like an auto bracketing. I like to do it like in 5 stops, 2 under, 2 over, and capture the entire dynamic range of the scene. The dynamic range being everything from the bright brights to the dark darks.
Okay.
And then I'll decide later whether I really need to use all of them. With the most of the cameras nowadays, they have incredible dynamic range anyway. So a properly exposed image with the right adjustments in Lightroom, you can pretty much pull out the shadow detail and control the highlights, but not always. So those other images are available if I feel like I need to do some blending of exposures to kind of rein in the dynamic range to something that's presentable in the image.
So would you bracket on like every single picture, or just if there was a high dynamic range of tones? So if it's like for me, when we were in Tuscany, we bracketed everything because it was, it was dark and just coming sunrise or sunset. So the sky was bright and the landscape was dark. So we would take different exposures so that we could blend them. So that was if I had a high dynamic range of tones. Is that when you do it, or do you do it all the time?
I definitely do it at sunrise and sunset.
Okay.
During the middle of the day, if it's like overcast sky, there's not much contrast in the scene. I might just do it with one image. But if it's like bright sunlight out and I'm still shooting toward the middle of the day, I'll definitely will bracket. If I'm taking pictures of a waterfall and it's an overcast day, usually I can get by with just one exposure. I don't need multiple exposures. But if there's sun in the scene of a waterfall where you got these intense highlights in addition to the shadows, then of course I will bracket. So I would say most of the time I do bracket, but there are times when it's obvious that it's not necessary. You can look at the histogram. The scene is well within the bounds of the histogram. There's no problem.
Now, do you blend them using a software, or do you use masks?
I usually use masks. If it's a
real control.
Yeah, I like to control it
better with the mask and software, right?
Yeah, control it better, and usually I find it results in a more natural looking result. Some of it, especially the HDR software, can result in images that, to me, that don't look that natural and have a lot of artifacts and things like that. But on Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw, you can combine images into using their HDR feature to create basically what's a super raw file. Like take 5 images, blend them together in HDR. When it asks you, do you want automatic tonal adjustments, say no. And really all that it's doing is creating this raw file, that combines the 5 other images and creates like a super raw file that now has more dynamic range. So that's an option. I sometimes use that when the scene is just too complex. There's light and dark areas, trees sticking out into the light areas, and things like that. It just kind of goes beyond my masking abilities, so I may opt for that approach.
I do too. I do it all the time actually, because it's so easy. Right? In Lightroom, you just select the ones you want, right click, boom, you're HDR, and it looks pretty natural most of the time.
Yeah, it's much better than it used to be, and I do that occasionally. Another way to do it is double process an image too. It's just take a single file, but process it a couple of different ways. Maybe once for the highlights and the other image more for the shadows. Then using layer mask, combine the two together.
Okay, so when you say that, what you're saying is take this one picture. And let's say you're using Lightroom, you're going to take the exposure up on one picture, right, and then maybe down on the other picture, right?
Right. And they're basically blend them together. They're basically duplicate pictures. The only difference is how you process them.
Okay. So you do an awful lot of the near far photography. You do an awful lot of bracketing. Is there any other special techniques or anything that you do a lot on a regular basis that you want to tell us about? Or is that kind of...
I do some what's called vertiramas, which is like it's like a panorama, except you just raising the camera up a little bit, raising it down a little bit, so that you get more of the scene than maybe what the lens allows you to take in. And then using the panorama feature of Lightroom to combine the 3 images, or maybe it's only 2 images together. That can be used also if you're kind of limited in your lens selection. Rather than using extreme wide angle lens, use something that is not as wide, take a couple of images and just blend them together. And it might provide a more natural looking result, less distorted than if you'd used like an extreme wide angle lens.
Oh,
I
that's
do that
great.
sometimes.
So that's a vertical panorama. You call it?
Yeah, right.
Vertigrama.
Vertirama.
I love that. I'm learning all kinds of new terms from you.
Yeah.
All right. So give us like a little top tips for conservation landscape photography.
Top tips.
Throwing you out there. See what you got. So see what you can come up with.
Top tips. Exercise some discretion in sharing images. Model good behaviors when you're taking images. Be very mindful of how other people might perceive what you're showing. For example, if you're walking out into the flower fields, or you're like in the middle of the flower field taking a selfie of yourself, that's probably not going to present the best image for others to follow, because they're going to want to replicate that behavior. Remind people of leave no trace principles. I think, do that occasionally. Don't drum it into them. Don't say it too much, but do it in a friendly way where they're more accepting of it. Educate yourself on the areas that you visit. I think is very important. What are the rules and the regulations? What is allowed? What isn't allowed? And try to be consistent with those rules and regulations. I think those are some of my tips. Yes.
I think that's great. And now, where can people find you?
They can find me on www.erwinbuske.com. It's my website. From my website, you'll also find my blog. There's links to my quarterly newsletter. You can find me on Facebook under Erwin Buske Photography. You can find me on Instagram under Erwin Buske Photography also.
And then if they find you on Facebook, they can find your Facebook groups as well?
Yes, yeah. They'll see a link there to Destination Pacific Northwest. We have a group, and we also have a page. Yes. Okay,
yeah, the groups are more interactive, so it's kind of nice.
Yeah, and anyone can join the group. The page is a little bit more restricted.
Exactly.
But we do once a day select a couple of images from people that post into the group to feature on the page. So it's kind of like a little bit of a reward, for those images that seem to stand out. And,
okay, that's nice. Well, thank you, Erwin, for being on the Understand Photography show.
Thank you, Peggy. So glad to be here.
To the audience, thank you so much for joining us on the Understand Photography show. I'm Peggy Farron. See you next Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, either as a podcast on YouTube or on Facebook.
Get up!